California, Mr. Bondage.
Hello. Here we are.
Greetings, double O's.
Hey, what is this, episode 7? I lose count after a point. Is that what
Episode 007.
it is? It is 007.
Yeah.
There we go. Nice. Yes. How appropriate. So
perfect. Yeah, perfect. Because we've got the father of James Bond fandom as our guest today.
Yeah, we did. We just we're introducing it, but we may have just spoken to him. So I don't know. It's a little bit of a time travel-y, timey-wimey thing. So
Wibbly wobbly.
Yeah, but you guys are going to love it. Richard Schenkman, who, if you saw us at our last screening, was our guest, but we love talking to him so much that we invited him back so we could have more of an in-depth conversation with him, which we definitely did. So,
and there's some fun stories. I think there's a couple of anecdotes that he told that some Bond fans are going to be real keen to hear. Really fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he is the father of Bond fandom. He doesn't argue it. So, I mean, he definitely.
Hey, we wouldn't be here if he didn't do what he did.
Yeah, there you go.
So none of us would, really. Anybody that does this.
Yeah, 100%. So enjoy that. And now, what else? What else is there on the menu that we need to discuss?
As you can see behind me, and on my T-shirt, a little Thunderball action is going on because it's toward the end of July 29th.
It's the last Tuesday of July. Yep.
Yes, and that's going to be our Thunderball screening at the Culver Theater with special guest Luciana Puzzi.
Yeah. Fiona Volpe.
Yes. She's very excited. Very excited. So that's going to be great. And we're going to, we'll be posting, of course, more about it with ticket links and everything. Tickets are on sale now. They've already started selling. Yeah. So if you are planning on going, don't wait, because this is going to be a big one. It's July, it's Thunderball. It's like kind of the ultimate summer Bond movie, if you will. And we're going to be in our cabana wear. So we encourage everyone. We saw people coming. I don't know if you remember, Neil, people started showing up at the last screening wearing like James Bond inspired outfits. So it was awesome.
A couple guys in full tuxes. I saw that.
The white dinner jackets. And so we're going to be in our cabana wear and for Thunderball. So everybody come dressed for Palmyra. It'll be good.
I think, and I believe, I mean, I could be wrong, but I believe it's the last screening in Los Angeles of Thunderball, I think, for the 60th. Not the last ever, but probably for the year and for the 60th.
I think so, there've been a handful in town this summer.
So should be good. And we do know, people have been asking, we do know for a fact that this will be the version screened at the TCM festival, right? Yeah. So this will be a 4K. 4K restoration. We do know for a fact. We've gotten some emails about that. Can't confirm it now. Found that out just a couple of hours back. So should be fun. So
if anybody was at the TCM screening or read about it, you'll know that people were, eyeballs literally flew out of sockets. Yeah, it looks so good. So that's what we got.
Yeah, cool.
Coming in July. So definitely going to be there. We got, of course, some themed cocktails again, and we're going to have the pre-show, of course.
Lobby displays, hopefully. I believe.
I believe those will be brought again. Lobby displays. Thank you, Bob.
Yep. Thank you, Bob. And this is not our off month, but it's our social meetup month. And this for June, we're going to be going to the Cigar Warehouse in Sherman Oaks, right?
Yep.
Should be good. That'll be Saturday, the 28th at 4 o'clock. Yeah. And should be really, really good. We're just going to have some good conversation, some smoking cigars. Just a good old time.
About Bond lounge. They got some nice loungy sofa couches, and you can just disappear into them like a leather marshmallow.
And who will be helping us out that day?
Our friend David.
Yeah,
that was the Burbank Boys.
Burbank Boys. He's the Q of cigars. So that'll be good.
So if you've never smoked cigars, or you're not too sure, or kind of like both Neil and I, who aren't huge aficionados, David's going to be on hand to make recommendations and help you with purchasing your fine stogie.
Yeah, we like to relax during the off months. It's good just to meet people and have people come out, if just kind of a socialized thing. So
they're very intimate gatherings.
Okay.
it's Neil and I just kind of hanging out with anybody
Yeah.
who wants to come over, and they're very laid back, chill. There's no dress code.
Yeah.
I mean, for the cigar
Yeah.
lounge, I think you don't want to come.
Wear clothes. So,
Yeah, don't come dressed for the beach.
So that'll be nice. So I'm very excited about that. Um,
Something else really big happened
what happened?
since our last.
I
There
don't
was
know. What is that?
First Light
The first light. Oh yeah.
video game. I heard.
Yeah. We're just gonna say it came out, and
Yeah,
a lot of people like it. I
we
like
heard
it. I
things.
like. Yeah, we heard some things, but
I'm excited. That's all I can say is I'll be playing. I'm a gamer. If anybody follows me on Instagram, they'll see me playing games from time to time. I don't do Twitch or anything like that. Maybe I should, but
yeah.
yeah, I'll be playing it. And
I think in terms of I mean, I'm not like a huge gamer. I used to be when I was a kid, but in terms of a video game, it looks in a Bond game, it hit all the marks, and I'm very like pleased with what I saw, and it's exciting. It got my goosebumps up, so I can't complain
yeah,
about that. So, um, we're not going to devote a 5 hour video to it, but just know
enough
that
has been
Steve and I,
said. I think you guys have heard
yeah, I think a
plenty.
lot of other more qualified people have covered it
Yes,
for us, and but just know Steve and I we give it a thumbs up. So
thumbs up.
yeah.
It'll
So
be a sweet distraction for an hour or two
yeah,
for
yeah,
us when it hits.
yeah.
So
There's a lot more qualified YouTubers that have definitely said all my opinions. So I'm very
yeah,
pleased. So yeah,
I'm still
cool.
catching up with games from like 10, 15
Yeah,
years ago. So
yeah,
I'm slow on the upchuck.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, what else? I'm doing a mental rundown in my head. Is there anything else or?
Trying to think. I
I
think
think
I think we've hit all the
I think we
Bond
yeah.
buttons
Yeah, the Bond buttons are
for
all
this particular period.
yeah. Come to Thunderball. There'll also be a special announcement for future scheduling. Not going to say what, but if for you to
Oh,
find out, just come and see. So
got to be there.
yeah, yeah. So shall we dive into our 1 hour conversation with Richard Schenkman? I was very happy he
Yes.
came back. It's just nice talking to these people that used to when I got into Bond fandom. You would read about people like him, and I'd be like, oh
Yeah.
yeah. You read about them in like a historical context, and then you're actually talking to them and meeting
Yeah. All
them,
of a
and
sudden, you just have
you know,
and it's
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, and then
These dreams kind of keep
it's
coming
funny.
true. And thank you, James Bond.
Thank you.
He's been very
Oh,
good to all of us,
yeah,
including our guest Richard Schenkman.
very good. Yeah. All right, man. Shall we show it,
Let's do it.
ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Richard Schenkman. All right. Until next time. Okay, here we are. Hi, Steve.
Greetings, everybody.
And our special guest today is Richard Schenkman, who, in addition to being a very prolific writer and producer and director, also is the founder of Bond Fandom, really, which is a very fun story in itself, and it led to many adventures that we just want to dive into. You were our guest at our film night last month, which went really well. Tons of people had fun, so we just wanted to have you back. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for
It's a
joining us,
pleasure to
Richard.
be back.
Yeah. So, I think we should just dive into how, I mean, some of the topics we talked about last month, some of the people listening weren't there. So
Hmm.
let's just touch on those. How did you get into Bond?
Okay, so I was a little kid. I was born in 1958, so I was a pretty little kid when Dr. No and Goldfinger came out. But of course, they were inescapable in the culture. And in fact, I had a James Bond attaché case, which I think was I don't know if that was created to tie in with Goldfinger or Thunderball, but it was around then. It was around 65.
Hmm.
So I knew who James Bond was. I loved to play James Bond, but my parents would not let me see James Bond movies because of the sex and violence. Basically, that's what my mother told me. So I didn't really get firsthand knowledge until I was away at summer camp one year, and I got to see You Only Live Twice at the local cinema in upstate New York on a rainy day, because that's what they would do with us on rainy days, is they would take us to see movies. So I saw You Only Live Twice, I guess on, I won't say initial release because these were second and third run theaters, these little theaters out in the country. So anyway, point is, within a year or so of its release, I got to see it, and then that was it. I was a James Bond fan. I had a friend in school, Bob Forlini, who was a Bond fan, and he told me about all the books. And so between the library and the local bookshop and books that Bob already had in his collection, I put together a whole set of the books. And then I went away to camp the next summer and read all the books. Meanwhile, in the lead up to the release of sorry, this happened over a course of a few years, I should point out. So it was in the lead up to the release of Diamonds Are Forever that over the year or so before that, they re-released all the movies in double features. So over the course of like a year and a half or 2 years, I got to see all the movies and read all the books and be fully caught up. And then I was, I wanted more, more. But in those days, there wasn't a bookshelf of books of the making of these movies or continuation novels by other writers besides Fleming. There was basically nothing. Eventually, the John Brosnan book, James Bond in the Cinema, came along, but that was really small and minimal. So I tried joining I thought, well, I'll join the Sean Connery fan club. They'll have something about Bond, but there was no Sean Connery fan club.
Oh, okay.
But by then, Live and Let Die was getting ready to come out. They had announced that Roger Moore was going to play James Bond in Live and Let Die. So I thought, okay, I'll join the Roger Moore fan club, which I did. But that was all like poems about how beautiful Roger was and stuff like that. So, well, that wasn't what I wanted either. But then I thought of the Baker Street Irregulars, the fan club for the fictional character Sherlock Holmes, and I said to Bob, like, why don't we do that? Let's make a fan club for the fictional character James Bond. So we called the United Artists office in New York and said, hey, we're a couple of teenagers. We want to make a fan club for James Bond. And they, thinking we'd have to like clear rights or do who knows what. And they said, sure, knock yourselves up.
Wow.
So that's what we did. We declared this fan club in existence, and we started publishing, sort of fanzines and newsletters, and the fanzine that we christened Bondage. And I used to spend Saturday mornings working in my dad's dry cleaning store in Greenwich Village. And up around the corner and up the street from my dad's store, which was on 6th Avenue between 11th and 12th Street, there was a cinema bookshop / movie memorabilia store called Cinemabilia on like 13th Street and 5th Avenue.
Okay.
So I would go there and spend whatever money my dad paid me buying 8x10 stills and posters and stuff like that. Whatever, I would buy like 1 or 2 pieces a week, and whatever I could afford at Cinemabilia, slowly building my collection and hanging it all up. Of course, not treating it with any respect at all, like instantly picking it up on this giant corkboard I had in my bedroom. So when we published this fanzine, I basically went to Cinemabilia and I said, hey, we have this fanzine about James Bond. Would you guys carry it in the shop? And they said, sure, we'll take 30 copies or 35 copies, whatever it was. So right from the start, we were able to have them in this bookshop, and that gave us the money to like print the next one,
Nice.
And then we would buy little ads in, because remember, there's no internet, there's no nothing.
Yeah.
But there was Photo Play magazine and things like that. And there were other fan publications. So you could join, I forget what it was called, but there was some kind of international fan club organization.
Okay.
And you could join that. So once you were part of that, you could then communicate with other fan clubs. So we would trade, like, oh, we'll promote your Roger Moore club if you promote our Bond club. We'll promote your, whoever club if you promote. And so slowly it started to grow, and so we did Bondage 1, Bondage 2. By Bondage 3, we had like, hundreds of members.
Wow.
And so I was able to spend a little more money on it. But then the other thing that happened with Bondage 3, sorry, this is a very long version.
No, it's all good. No, please.
It's great.
Yeah.
I had come across a guy who was doing marketing for Pennzoil. And I guess Pennzoil was doing a tie-in with The Man with the Golden Gun, perhaps. And he said, oh, we want to communicate, direct with Bond fans. So he gave me the money to basically print Bondage 3 in exchange for making a few hundred copies for him that had a different cover that
Okay.
had a Pennzoil ad.
Oh,
in it.
nice. Okay.
Oh,
And then it just kind of grew from there. And then, at some point, Playboy did their little, blurb about the club, and then it really exploded. And then we started, having 2,000-3,000 members all over the world.
wow.
And I carried on with it. Bob eventually, was not interested. I guess when we were graduating high school and getting ready to go to college, Bob was like, I'm not interested. I have to concentrate on college. I want to, date girls. I want to do stuff like that. So I can't do this anymore. So I took over the club myself, and I carried on with it as long as I could until finally I too was dating girls. No, in all seriousness, actually that fit right in. Really, what happened was just having an actual career, graduating college, and getting a job at the thing that became MTV. After that, I just, I just didn't have the time not to not to do it justice. Of course, I do wish I had stayed, because if I had hung on for a few more years, the internet would have come along,
Yeah.
which would have made all of it a lot easier and a lot more lucrative. Not that I was doing it to make money, but when I went to Mexico to visit a Bond movie, or I went to the Bahamas to visit a Bond movie, I did all that on my own dime. It wasn't like the movie company flew me in or anything.
Yeah.
So, but I was able to pay for stuff like that, and for color covers, and for better paper, for better photo reproduction. All the money that we sort of made doing, various things with the club, all just got put right back into publications, which again was fine. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, I ran out of time.
I guess we all do. Would you print it out yourself, or did you hire people to do it, or how did it go? How did that go about?
Only the very, very first
Yeah.
magazine and newsletter were self-printed, like mimeographed.
Okay.
Very early on, we went to professional printing.
Mm-hmm.
No, the first two bondages were just mimeographed, Xerox, whatever. By Bondage 3, it was professional printing.
Okay.
And by the end, it was, like I said, color pictures, slit paper.
Was it a month? Was it monthly, bi-monthly, or
Oh,
how
God.
No, probably not monthly, but
it was supposed to be. No.
Okay.
It was supposed to be 2 issues of Bondage a year and 4 newsletters.
Okay.
There were very, very, very few years, if any, where I actually achieved all that.
Okay. Okay.
Let's put it this way. I started the thing in 73, ended it in
90. What was it? I think it was 90.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And over all those years did 17 issues of the magazine.
Okay.
So it's 1.5 a year,
Okay.
maybe.
Wow. Okay.
Richard, what was the first thing about James Bond? Even if you hadn't seen any of the movies or anything yet, was there an image? Was there a something on TV? Was there something that all of a sudden it was like the lightning bolt going off, where you went, "Hey, what's that?"
It's funny that you say that, because clearly I had the attaché case years before I saw a Bond movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it was just osmosis. I don't know if it was the behind the scenes specials that they would play on TV. I don't know if it was like Life and Look magazine articles, that iconic Connery cover, Thunderball, with the torn wetsuit. I think it was just cultural osmosis. It just was, this is cool. This is super duper cool. And I want to know more about it.
Yeah.
And then when I finally got to see You Only Live Twice, in the cinema, it was just like, oh shit, this is
nice. This is it.
What, until you went to school, was it a full-time job at that time, or?
No, I mean, it never could have been that.
Okay.
It never could have been that, because I was a student, and plus, until, for the most part, it was very scrambling. The first number of years, it was all just stealing what I could from other publications, or printing every word of press kits that Eon and United Artists were putting out. It was only later, when they invited me to a press junket, and I got to sit in a round table with other journalists. Or the Museum of Modern Art did a tribute to Cubby and the film. They did a retrospective of the films, and that was when I got to interview Cubby, and I met Barbara. And then later, uh, when Kevin McClory invited me to the set of Never Say Never Again, and then of course when I officially got to visit the two Dalton movies, like that was the most legit I ever really was. I was really getting my own primary exclusive material because I was sitting there and interviewing everybody.
Yeah.
Anybody who would talk to me. I mean, it's funny. I was going through my the bondage that I wrote about living License to Kill, and I did not remember that I had chatted with Benicio del Toro when he was like basically a teenager, in his first movie.
Wow.
Or that I'd done a long sit down interview with Robert Brown, who played M. I mean, if you would have held a gun to my head and said, "Richard, did you ever interview Robert Brown?" I would have said, "No, I'm afraid not."
Oh wow. Okay. Well, there's
Just
the
well, turns out I did.
proof.
It's really funny. I mean, I don't know. Other people certainly have better memories than I do. I'm just glad when I was young, I wrote a lot of things down because otherwise they'd be gone forever. I mean, like pictures. I don't have pictures of me with Tim or Robert Brown or Benicio del Toro or anybody. Like why didn't I think to ever get a shot of myself with those people? It never occurred to me. It's just like it wasn't why I was there. It just never occurred to me. Like, gee, I should get a picture with Tim. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know if I answered your question. Sorry.
Oh no, you definitely are. No. So you met.
You have
Cubby.
I'm sorry, Neil. Go ahead.
No.
No, I was just going to ask, like, out of all the sets that you had visited, was there any moment that really sticks out in your mind as whoa, this is like any stunt, it could even be like behind the scenes, somebody mistaken you for a PA or yelling anything like that? Because
no. Well, remember, I only visited 3 sets. I only visited. Sadly, I never got to visit. For good or ill, I only visited Never Say Never in the Bahamas, and Living Daylights in London and up in Thetford, and then License to Kill in Florida and Mexico. So, and I tried to just be on set all day, all night. I tried while I was there. I tried to just be in the action, talking to somebody, observing, making notes. Just nonstop. I definitely, saw like something I'll never forget is Sean Connery really getting pissed off at Irvin Kershner for leaving him floating in the water in between takes when he hadn't really decided what he was going to do next. When they were shooting this sequence where Bond and Domino jump off of this cliff on a horse.
Oh yeah.
And it was interesting because I was in 2 of the 3 locations of that sequence because they jumped off the horse somewhere. I forget where that was, somewhere in Europe. Then the horse and Domino and Bond falling was a miniature that was shot in Los Angeles. And I visited that. I was there when they were actually shot some of that. And then of course the end is when they splashed down in the water, and that was in the Bahamas.
Oh wow.
So I was there for that part. And there's people shooting at them and all that. But that was the closest I ever got really to Sean Connery, basically like that. But the only other time I was in the same room with Sean Connery was when he received the Man of the Year award from the Harvard Hasty Pudding Theatrical Company.
Oh, wow.
And I had bought a ticket. I had traveled to Cambridge and bought a ticket to go to that event. Again, hoping against hope I'd maybe get to talk to him, but of course that didn't happen. And unfortunately, on the set of Never Say Never Again, no one was going to let me talk to him. It was really unfortunate, but nobody let me talk to him. And like I said, certainly he was in a shitty mood that day. But I guess the other closest I ever came was when I was at MTV. Kurt Loder who had been the head of MTV News, he did a cover story for Rolling Stone about Sean Connery. So he got to do several sit-down interviews,
Oh, wow.
and he wanted to borrow copies of Bondage to help in his research.
Nice.
And what he did was he stuck one or more of them in front of Connery to have you ever seen this? And Connery had not seen it, but he got Connery to sign
Oh, wow.
my copy of Bondage 1 for me.
Nice.
Which was very nice.
That's a nice.
That's a great story. Yeah, I know.
Kurt Loder's a lovely guy.
Yeah, no, I used to watch him.
Yeah.
So you were on Never Say Never Again. Can you talk a bit about what that set was like? What was the vibe? It's kind of a divisive film. Some people really love it or they don't. So,
I mean, it's kind of a mess. You know, it would have been really interesting. The problem was that, everything changed with Die Hard. Like Die Hard rewrote the rules on an action movie. And I think in another era, Never Say Never Again could have been a really interesting meditation on what it means to be an elderly spy. How long can you really do it before either you get killed or you've just got to stop? And I think it could have been really interesting to spend some of the movie looking kind of seriously at that. But instead, there were just way too many cooks on the movie. Yeah. And it was, it's funny. My daughter, as you guys know, my daughter came with me to the Living Daylight screening, and she has not seen Never Say Never Again. Okay. But she was looking at the pictures in my magazine, and she was saying, wait, Kim Basinger played Bond's love interest? She's like, not his daughter. Like,
yeah.
It's just creepy. So it could have been great. It could have been amazing. It could have been amazing. It could have been a real, especially when you consider how lousy the Roger Moore, that was the same summer as Octopussy.
Yeah.
Which is just embarrassing. And so Never Say Never could have been a sort of, you see, this is how you do it, but didn't work out like that.
Yeah. I
think Irvin Kershner was very, very much the wrong guy.
Yeah.
He had said something in an interview where, I don't really direct action.
Yeah.
But when you look, and I think we mentioned this in another earlier podcast, where if you look at Empire Strikes Back, and it's action-packed movie, but all the action there is like all story related, especially the lightsaber fight between Luke and Darth Vader. There's dialogue, everything is moving forward. So I think that was his hook really in that movie and why that was so successful. And when you look at Never Say Never Again, there's not much story being told in regard to like a lot of the action sequences. They all of a sudden, like every time I watch the movie, I kind of start checking out, and then there's the motorcycle chase, and I sort of sit up again a little bit, and I always find myself not really paying much attention, and it feels like a very disjointed movie because of that. And then when I heard Kershner say, "Well, I don't direct action. I don't know what I'm doing," and that particular movie, people, like I said, people love it. It's fun. Connery's a lot of fun in it, but yeah, it's like you were saying earlier, it's very messy.
Yeah, I think it's just, I was rereading my interview with John Glenn in from the set of License to Kill, and he's talking about how at more than one point on that movie there are 4 units going. There's the first unit, second unit, aerial unit, underwater unit, specialized unit, and the director, even though the director is not directing all those units, the director is still directly supervising each of those units, because they have gone over with the directors of each of those units what the shots are. Now, of course, we all know that there are, like on the Marvel movies, for example, that's maybe not necessarily how it works. Like the unit doing the so-and-so sequence just goes and does the so-and-so sequence. And maybe they're not even answering to the director of the picture. Maybe they're just answering to Kevin Feige,
Mhm.
which is why, you sometimes have, whereas like Christopher Nolan directs every single shot of a Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah.
So it's what kind of a director are you? Are you the kind of director who is like, look at a John Wick movie,
Mhm.
like clearly one person is directing every shot of the movie, because there's a unified vision. So all of which is to say, like, I don't know how the Star Wars movie was made. I don't know if
Mhm.
Kirshner actually personally directed every sequence or oversaw even the action sequences. I don't know. I mean, frankly, I've heard lots of rumors about that movie over the years.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I like to find Madness. His earlier movie with Sean Connery, but that's a contained little, farce.
Yeah.
Um, so you met, can you take us back to how you met uh, Cubby Broccoli and how that came to be?
Well, I don't know that I can.
Okay.
Because it was I mean, he knew who I was,
Yeah.
because I had been running the club for a while, and maybe I had written to him,
Mhm.
and maybe his office had written back. Certainly Saul Cooper and those guys were showing him the magazine. um it was a fairly small. Remember, even though United Artists put the movie out, the Eon really made the movie. They
Mhm.
controlled the marketing. you know Press photographs, interviews, like all material was made in-house at Eon. And I went to their office in London one time, and there were
Oh
like
wow.
three people there.
Oh wow.
I mean, it's really, yes, obviously when they're making the movie, there's hundreds of people working, but otherwise there's like three or four people in an office. That's really it.
Wow.
So it was a very small, tight knit thing. So Cubby definitely knew who I was. And, I'd been after, I'm sorry, I would have pulled out the magazine where I did my first interview with him,
Oh, no worries.
to refresh my memory for this. But at one point, I mean, I certainly made it clear that it was important to me to interview Cubby. That
Sure.
that what I was doing with this magazine was not just trying to interview stars.
Of
I wanted
course.
to interview directors, writers, special effects technicians, you know, anybody, and certainly Cubby,
Hmm.
because like that was the common thread. If there
Yeah.
was one common thread running through James Bond, it was Cubby Broccoli.
Hmm.
So I interviewed him. Finally, they gave me, like a sit down interview at one point. He was not a very good interview. He was really reticent. He didn't want to go much into his thought process. He was very old school producer. All he really ever wanted to talk about was, the new movie. All he wanted to do was like promote the new movie. But here I
Hmm.
was, really trying to say, but let's go back to Dr. No. Let me
Yeah.
like, let's,
Yeah.
he was reluctant to do that. So it was difficult. And but I got to speak to him, more than once.
That's good.
Uh, and It was funny, I when I met Barbara that first time at Lackman, like I really liked her a lot.
Hmm.
And I mean, I really thought we could be friends. We're the same age, we have this thing in common. We both have aspirations for a career in film outside of Bond.
Hmm.
you know um I don't know, in another universe, I really feel like she and I could have been good friends.
Hmm.
Um Certainly, when I was hanging around with her and her sister in Mexico City, we had a great old time drinking tequila, having dinner,
Oh, nice.
talking about all
Nice.
kinds of stuff. I mean, you know um sorry, again, I went off
No,
topic again.
it's all
No,
good
that's
stuff.
awesome.
No, it's all good stuff. It's all good stuff because you read like general publicity, but you don't really know what the people are like. So it's good to talk
Yeah.
with you, someone who actually like met, worked with them, spent time, like
Yeah.
what they're like when the camera's not on. So
Oh,
Yeah, no,
which
I
is
mean, Cubby. I mean, I have enormous affection for Barbara. I mean, I don't know her well, obviously. We've
yeah,
only seen each other a few times, but just in my heart, I've always kind of maintained real affection for her.
sure.
And I tell you what, man, when Casino Royale came out,
Yeah.
my estimation for her just
Oh yeah.
skyrocketed. It was so. Although it is interesting, I went back and reread, like I told you, I reread some of the stuff I'd
Hmm.
written earlier, and talking to Michael Wilson. Uh, the Dalton movies, especially the second one, really was a conscious effort
Yeah.
to make the movies more realistic, more serious. So like Casino Royale wasn't their first swing at that.
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
really were consciously trying to go, okay, what would happen in the real world?
Yeah.
And then somehow they went from that to invisible cars. You know,
Yeah, I know. No,
I
they definitely
don't,
did.
I don't know what happened, but if you think about it, the same thing kind of happened with the Daniel Craig
Yeah.
movies. You
It
know,
did. It kind of slid into that again. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
Casino Royale being, and I personally blame Michael Wilson. Um, I think, but it is so funny. I think I told you when we were talking the other time that I, towards the end of my interview with him that time on the set, I was just running all these ideas by him very quickly. You know, for example, the idea of rebooting Bond, um, period.
Hmm.
And he said, no, 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 you know, Bond's got to be contemporary. And I said, well, what about a TV series? And he said, no, 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 we can never do a TV series and the film series concurrently. You know, like maybe when the theatrical series is dead, maybe then we could do TV. You know, and I asked him a few other, but it was funny, like to look at those answers now,
Yeah.
all these 30 years later, you
Yeah.
know, and what has changed and what hasn't. But no, Cubby just was he was an old school producer,
Hmm.
you know, and on one hand, he was incredibly dedicated to giving the audience a good time and their money's worth, regardless of what it cost. On the other hand, you know, he didn't care about casting the same Felix Leiter more than
Yeah.
once, you
Yeah.
know, or
Yeah, that's very true.
you know, but then again, at the same time, he had sequences that he loved from the Fleming books.
Yeah.
For example, like I think I told you the other time we were talking that Michael Wilson told me that Cubby was the one who kept saying that he wanted the keel hauling sequence,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
you know, put in a movie, and from the book Live and Let Die, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was the one who kept saying, "Well, I love that sequence." Where you know, and they would kept trying to put it in, but either it was too expensive, or nobody wanted to, you know, go underwater, or they were going to have to get a whole bunch of boats, and it just was going to, you know, and it just kept getting kicked out. But so, you know, it's very possible that he just didn't want to share it with me. I
Hmm.
feel like if there was anybody with whom he could share his personal affection for James Bond, it would be me.
Hmm.
But like I
You would
said,
think.
I also think he maybe had a bit of an issue, like looking at me like somebody who was maybe making some money off of
Hmm.
Bond,
Mm.
and that wasn't right. Like nobody
Hmm.
but Eon should be making money off of Bond.
Well,
Now, of course, I wasn't really making money off of
yeah,
Bond,
of
like I
course.
told you, you know.
Yeah.
But I think in his mind, he's like, who is this kid? Why does he get to do this? You know, like at
Yeah.
one point, for example, they did write me a letter because I used to freely use the gun, the you
Hmm.
know, the 007 gun logo. And at one point, they wrote me a letter saying, you know, you can't do that anymore.
Mm.
Oh.
That was when we redesigned the Bondage logo to have like the sort of mock-up of the gun barrel in
Yeah.
the O. But you know, yeah, we stopped, you know, using that logo anywhere because they said not to.
Yeah.
I'm curious. You said earlier you were invited by Kevin McClory to Never Say Never Again. Now, contrasting with Cubby Broccoli, what was McClory like?
Well, remember McClory had been a filmmaker. Like he had actually made an award-winning movie, you know, so
Mm.
he was coming at much more as a sort of artist, you know. Plus, you know, and not to make, you know, cliches about Irish people, but he, you know, really was very much this kind of raconteur, you know, this large personality. You know, he loved to drink and he loved to tell a tale, and um, you know, so very different kind of personality indeed. And he, you know, you have to remember how his connection to Bond started. He read like what probably was the first Bond book, and either on the first one or the second one, basically went to Ian Fleming and said, "These should be movies. You know, I'm from Ireland, but I have a place in the Bahamas. We should go write a Bond movie to shoot in the Bahamas.
Mm.
I know that well. You know, we could have some fun underwater stuff." And that's where the whole Thunderball thing began. You know, it was just this like two sort of, you know, British gentlemen, you know, working together on this thing. And and then of course we all know
Yeah.
how horribly south that went.
Yeah.
But he still was coming at it much more like a quote unquote creative person.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I'm not sure. Anyway, he was always very charming to me, as
Okay.
all as I could see. I met with him in his hotel room in Manhattan one time. We talked for a long, long time. He was very good after that about answering, letters and inquiries. I could get him on the phone.
Oh wow.
And like I said, he's the one. Again, not that they flew me down there,
Yeah.
but he's he was the one who said I could come visit the set.
When you talked with him, did you talk about the lawsuit with Fleming, or did you just talk
Sure.
about you
Oh,
did? Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if you have the issue, but there was
No, I don't have the issue.
there's
Yeah.
an extensive Kevin McClure interview in an
Okay.
issue of Bondage. We talk about it, and that was when he told me the name. He showed me the script. I didn't
Yeah.
get to read it, but he showed
Yeah.
it to me. It was called Warhead,
Yeah.
and I think at one point he was saying that he was like he had. At one point he was saying he had co-written it with Sean Connery. I mean, things kept changing, obviously, quickly.
Yeah.
But he said he had all these notes. He said the 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 gist of his ongoing battle with Cubby was that he said he had the rights to all the material he had created
Mm,
with Ian Fleming. So
mm.
there was not only the story that became Thunderball, but there was every other kind of version of that and like other things. So that by
Yeah.
extension, he had the rights to go make his own series of James Bond
Oh
movies. Now,
man.
mm.
Okay.
that was a stretch. Although it's so funny that he
Yeah.
did that, and yet it completely escaped him
Hmm.
to go after Cubby and those guys back when Doctor No came out,
Yeah.
and they referenced Spectre,
Oh yeah.
which of
Oh
True.
course
yeah.
was created for the book Thunderball.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And yeah,
So he should have gone to them and said, excuse me, but
that's weird. Yeah. Yeah.
you can't use Spectre and Blofeld. I own that." But he never did.
Hmm.
It didn't even occur to him.
That's interesting. He fought them right up until he died, I think, basically,
Oh
right? I
yeah,
mean, he kept
right.
he kept going with that for a
I
long
even
time.
remember when I
Yeah.
was in college, Sony made an
Oh,
announcement.
Sony, I
As,
remember
oh,
all
there's
that.
going to be another,
Yeah.
and Kevin McClory popped up, and they were calling it Warhead or James Bond
And I
2000 or
think they
something.
were
And
saying that Timothy Dalton would come back. I don't know. There were all
yeah, there
these
were all
like
these
crazy
rumors. Liam
rumors.
Neeson was going to
Yeah.
play him for a
Yeah.
hot minute, and
Yeah.
but it was
Lots
going to
of
be Thunderball again
Yeah,
because
Again.
that's the
basically,
only
yeah,
movie they can make. Yeah.
really. I mean, lots of nonsense. I remember. Oh, in that same conversation, I remember asking Michael Wilson about Casino Royale,
Hmm.
and and at the time, of course, the rights were held by somebody else. But it was something they were. I mean, they never stopped looking at the Casino Royale.
Yeah.
They never
Sure.
stopped being interested in that.
Yeah.
So that when it finally came to them, obviously they jumped on it.
Yeah. That's a great film, obviously.
Yeah,
Uh,
yes.
um, so you met Timothy Dalton. Can you talk a bit about that and what that was like? And yeah.
Well, it was funny because I met him on the set of
Mhm.
Living
Living Dead.
Daylights
Yeah.
in the UK, and you know they were doing something to him that was really kind of shitty, which was they were inviting journalists to the set like every day, So in addition to trying to do his job, which is not easy, especially when you consider how much more of his own physical action he was doing
Yeah.
than Roger Moore ever did. He was running across rooftops in
Mhm.
Marrakesh and all this stuff. So they really were pushing him hard, and there I was sort of hanging around, and I could see him sort of eyeing me like, who's the kid hanging around. But I knew Barbara, and I kind of knew Michael, and I think I'd even maybe already interviewed John Glenn. So it was weird. Like here I was this kid hanging around, but I kind of knew people, and I would go up to anybody and talk to them, and of course I knew Saul Cooper and the on-set press guys. So, and maybe we had like exchanged a word at the craft services table or something like that. But then finally, I was introduced like, okay, Timothy, this is Richard. He's going to interview you. 10 minutes, no personal questions.
Mhm.
But before we even started, he sort of said to me, "Okay, I don't understand. Like, why is there a fan club? What do you mean there's a fan club?" So I tried to explain it. Of course, I was nervous. He's James Bond, and I was,
Yeah.
whatever the hell I was. I don't know if I was. What year would that have been?
86,
Okay, so I
87.
was.
Yeah, around there. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I was, mid-20s.
Yeah.
So I did the best I could. I reread the interview. It's actually a pretty good interview.
Hmm.
Because we just talked about the work, and I was really enamored. The more I talked to him, and the more I understood how seriously he took the whole thing, how dedicated to being faithful to Fleming he
Yeah.
was, the more I respected him.
Yeah.
So I just really was, a huge fan. I walked in the door a fan because I thought he was so well cast. I
Yeah.
loved that he was a Shakespearean actor. I loved that he was young. I loved that he smoked. I loved that he, looked good for the role, looked a little tough. I walked in the door liking him, and then I walked out the door liking him even more. Um, and then what happened in Mexico when I went back for the second movie, I got to hang out a little bit socially at the same party. It was at Barbara's. I want to say it was at Barbara's rented house in Mexico City.
Mhm.
That there was just like a
Oh,
party,
wow.
like whatever night it was. It was
Wow, sounds fun.
eating food and drinking tequila, at Barbara's house. And um, so we got to chat informally. And he finally looks at me and he says, "Oh, I get it. You want to be a filmmaker. You're here to learn how these movies are made." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, okay." And like from then on, we were like pals. It was I mean, I won't go that far, obviously, but I mean,
That's great.
but like it was just a whole other deal. So that when we sat down to do like our next sort of formal interview, it was a whole other vibe. Like if you sit and read the two interviews back to back, it's just this whole other vibe.
That's funny.
And but again, he's great. And plus it's fun because we get to talk a little bit about the first film and how it worked out, and his hopes for this one, and and the second one was much harder to make. It just was.
Yeah.
It was just harder to make. They were going for more of a gritty realism.
Yeah.
There were problems. It was hot as hell
Yeah.
in Mexico City, and even hotter still in Key West. It was disgusting. I mean, there was a sequence they shot at an airport in Key West, and I just watched him like go through 3 shirts. It was because it wasn't like today where you use a lot of natural light,
Sure.
and there are these like to balance the daylight, I guess, coming through the big open door. They just pounded him and this girl, this actress who was like a check-in clerk, like a ticket counter. It was a little ticket counter scene where he's trying to get on a flight or whatever. And the two of them, they blast. I mean, just standing anywhere near it was painful. It was so, and there they were trying to act in front of it. Sorry, I don't know how to get on.
No, it's all great stuff. No, I love all this stuff.
Wandering down these.
No, it's good stuff. I just think it's hilarious that it took him 2 films to realize why you were there. I mean, for him to be like, "What?" Now I understand it. Like,
2 films and some tequila.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. See? That's fun.
And also, I mean, honestly, again, seeing that Barbara treated me.
I'm sure that helped. I'm sure that helped.
Not that we were peers. Obviously, she's the producer of Bondage, but I mean, it was that definitely helped.
Yeah. Who do you think is well? Do you think Timothy Dalton is the closest to the novels? What do you think about that? That's a loaded question, but I just wanted to ask.
I mean, probably, yeah.
Yeah, I do
probably
too.
so. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Casino Royale, and I love.
Oh yeah.
And then obviously what Sean Connery did. I mean, but you're right. It's a different question. It's not who's your favorite Bond.
Yeah.
I mean, who's your favorite Bond is even a different question from who's the best Bond.
Yeah.
And then the third question is who's probably most like Bond as described by Fleming. And I think Dalton.
Yeah, no, 100%. He just had it down. He even looks like him from the novels. So I just
and the darkness, I mean, like Bond is. I mean, what I don't want to say suicidal, but he's certainly not doing anything much of anything to avoid death with between the smoking
comfortable
and
with
the
death.
drinking.
Yeah.
And
And especially in like the first few Fleming novels, he didn't come across to me as a particularly happy guy.
He's not very nice,
you know. And yeah, he's a real SOB. And then but then also, like, I remember when I got to the end of Casino Royale the first time I read it, I thought, oh, he's a hopeless romantic, and my heart actually broke a little bit, because I'm gonna go marry this girl, and oh,
bitch is dead now. Yeah. Tough to be James Bond. Plus, I think it's very hard for a contemporary audience to, especially American audience, you know, we've got like the Second Amendment, to understand the concept of a guy having a license to kill. This is, you know, this is a time in England when police were not armed.
Yeah.
You know, police had maybe a stick and a whistle. And here's a guy who's a World War II veteran who is on a very short list of people in the whole country who's legally allowed to carry a firearm. And if he sees a need to kill somebody, just kill somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, trying to put that in context now for contemporary audiences. And you know,
you see even just Bond fans on Instagram. There's a whole swath of them that'll, you know, take pictures of their my daily carry, and they got a Walther or they got another. So everybody's got to.
So look at how well that's worked out.
Not very well. It's not going well.
No, but I mean, so the idea that, you know, and you get your 00 prefix by murdering in cold blood.
Yeah.
Like on assignment. In other words, it's not even okay if you have to kill some people in the execution of this mission. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's like, no. Go to this place at this time and kill this guy.
Yeah.
Because the Queen needs you to.
Yeah. And this was like the early 50s. Yeah.
You know, it would be, I think, really helpful if people could somehow remember that. You know, if it could somehow effectively. It's why I hope so much that either if they're going to reboot the series, or they're going to create a new series a TV series for, it's why I hope that if they're going to reboot the film series, or if they're going to create a television series for Amazon, they do a really honest, gritty period show.
Yeah.
That does somehow capture that.
Yeah.
You know, like, we're trusting you with a gun, young man.
Yeah.
You know, and nobody else has one. You know, nobody else has one, but you do.
It's funny because we last summer, I remember I was at my parents' house and I put on Dr. No randomly one day, and they just sat down, started watching it with me. And the scene where he kills Professor Dent popped up. They'd seen the movie before, but it had been a long time. So, and he goes, "You've had your 6," and then kills the guy. My dad is a Army veteran. And he was a career officer and a combat veteran. He sat there and saw that moment and went, "Holy crap!"
It's hardcore.
It's still a shocking moment. Even when we screened it at the Culver Theater and that moment came up, half the crowd kind of went like that. It's even
dramatic.
From however many 25, 26 movies, however many there are, that's still like kind of a moment that still grabs people by the throat and reminds them that this guy is not, you know, he may be like this, but he's not really like that most of the time, not inside.
No, and you go from that to Roger Moore, you know, accidentally swallowing a belly button ring or something, to having you know, a legitimate argument on the set with John Glenn about whether he would push over that car.
Oh man,
yeah.
You know,
that's such a great scene.
I love it.
Do that. I wouldn't do that. So, well, you wouldn't do it,
but James
Bond sure as hell would. It's funny. I did when I forget which interview, my first or second interview with Dalton, I specifically mentioned, you know, that you know, killing Professor Dent, and I say, like, you know, Bond hasn't killed anybody in cold blood since then. And he pushes back. He says, well, that wasn't cold blood. I said, no. He said, no, you know, the guy had killed Strangways, and he had just, you know, pumped, you know, bullets into what he thought was Bond's body on the bed. He said, no, I'm, you know, and I love that he pushed back. That he was defending Bond's action, like, and
he took it personally.
It was that kind of thing that really made me fall in love with Dalton. You know, it was like, that wasn't cold blood. It's like, all right, if you insist.
Yeah, I know. It's
Yeah.
pretty hardcore. It's pretty hardcore. Yeah, I think that moment and the like you said it, and for your eyes only, those are the those moments always shock people because up to that point Roger Moore had just been Roger Moore, and then you're like, oh crap, he just kicked this guy off a cliff. So
Well, he has a moment in Spy Who Loved Me
oh,
that's
that's right,
pretty
yes.
with
Yeah,
where's
with the
Fakesh, and then he with the
with the
tie.
tie. Yeah. But
My nephew saw that moment and went, "Whoa, that was awesome!"
yeah.
And it's funny, isn't it? It's funny how powerful those moments are.
Yeah.
And that's really something to remember. And
Yeah.
indeed, Casino Royale, that sequence, that opening sequence
Oh.
where with the black and white flashbacks.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
It's so great. It's such an extraordinarily economic, I mean not economic, economical way to deliver that backstory, tell us who Bond is, how he feels about the whole thing, very, very quickly.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful storytelling.
Yeah, it's well
I
done.
remember when I first saw that in the theater and they just opened cold because I always get excited for the gun barrel.
Yeah,
then the movie opens cold, and I remember going, what? And just kind of. But then once he spun around and he shot the guy and the barrel, the way they did that barrel in that one, it's the only Bond movie that I will go, okay, no exact gun barrel at the beginning. I'm fine with that one because they actually did something with it.
I think Casino Royale, honest to God, I think it's a flawless motion picture.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
From start to finish, I just think I mean, outside of Bond, it is just a flawless motion picture.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, they screened it in Los Angeles at Christmas, I think, and we went and I hadn't seen it in quite a while, and people were so into it still. Like they had discussion groups outside. It definitely grips people still. So
yeah.
I got
some of those lines. There were dinner jackets, and there were dinner jackets, and there were dinner jackets, and that's in the latter category.
Yeah, I know.
And then I love that scene on the train between the two of them where they're kind of picking each other apart, and I mean that's so great. And then of course when he gives Vesper their cover and he's joking about like making light of earlier cheeky Bond names like, oh, and your name is Miss Stephanie Broadchest.
Yeah.
I love how they still kind of kept all that in there. While keeping it grounded, and more down to earth.
Yeah. I guess we could bring it back to Bondage. Now, you ended it in 1990. What were you sad when it ended, or were you ready to?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, in retrospect, I wish I could have held on for just another few years for the internet. For eBay, or the internet.
Yeah.
Because I mean, God, I had so much stuff, Italian posters and copies of my graphic novel that I had published, with the early McCluskey comic strips and stuff. And I just let it all go for pennies because my parents were moving and it was all stored in their basement. I lived in an apartment in Manhattan. I certainly couldn't, put it anywhere. And I just didn't see a future for it. Not given how busy I was. I was incredibly busy. My career was really kind of, burgeoning at that time. So I just had no time at all. So I was definitely sad to do it. And I really wish someone had said, oh, Richard, if you could just hang on 4 more years, there's going to be this thing. I remember when John Cork told me about eBay, I said, what? And it's like,
was it like a specific moment, or was it kind of a cumulative thing where after a while you realized, I can't do it anymore?
Well, I just kept meaning to do another issue, and I just kept not, and I just felt badly because people were, sending in membership dollars to be a member of this organization with the completely legitimate expectation that they were going to get a couple of publications. And I, of course, I had long abandoned the idea that your membership was a year. It was just it was just however long it took me to do 2 magazines and a couple of newsletters. Like that's how long your membership lasted. And of course that was frustrating to people. I'm sure most people understood. They're like, yeah, this is a hobby, and plus, with Bond, we go long periods of time when they're not without there being anything to write about because they're not making a new film. I mean, I was so proud of some of the stuff I did, like when I was in London and found those earlier writings by Ian Fleming, Treasure Hunt in Eden and stuff like that, and publish them in the magazine, and some of the stuff that other people had contributed, Raymond Benson and some other people. I was terribly proud, and indeed, it had always been my intention to do one last issue that was going to be sort of a combination best of Bondage and also collect the random pieces that people had submitted over the years that I hadn't had a chance to publish yet. And I was going to kind of publish that and say to everybody, okay, this is sort of this big double issue, like this satisfies any obligation I have to you financially, plus here we are. This really kind of collects it all, because a lot of the earlier issues obviously had gone out of print.
Yeah.
Although not that the earlier issues even really had anything worth collecting. I mean, it was only once I started getting my own interviews, interviewing Tom Mankiewicz, interviewing Terrence Young, interviewing Cubby.
Oh, wow.
It was only interviewing, it was only then that the magazine really started being worth anything. That, and like I said, finding those early Fleming pieces. It was, I mean, the first couple of issues of Bondage, I would say, like, aren't worth, like they're just like a compendium of whatever I was able to find in the meat. Like, they're a bunch of crap, basically. It's really only starting with issue 3 or 4 that it starts really being something of value, in my opinion. So anyway, that was the plan. And then I didn't get to do it. And then John Cork swore he was going to help me do it. But he never did either, because he also got busy. So that's why I made the decision where if anybody would come to me, like, commanderbond.net and some of these other sites and fan publications, that if anybody would ever come to me and say, hey, can we reprint your Terrence Young interview? I would say, sure, go ahead, because I want the material out there.
Yeah.
I'm proud of it. And in a lot of cases, these are people who didn't really do a lot of interviews, Derek Meddings and some of the, John Steers and some of these other people,
Oh, wow.
That's pretty good.
Peter Hunt, Ken Adam, I interviewed a lot of people. And
do you remember if you interviewed any of the stunt guys, like BJ Worth or?
Well, Paul Weston. And what's his name? Oh, come on.
I don't know.
He did a bunch of them. He did a bunch of them.
Well, BJ Worth was a big.
No, the British guy.
The guy that's in the documentaries. I forget his name. It's not
drawing a blank.
No, I'm gonna look it up. There's a guy that's in every single making of doc.
Yeah, like when you look at Dr. No, it's him in the gun barrel.
Yeah,
I know it.
Bob Simmons.
There you go.
Bob
Thank
Simmons,
you.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I said Woodward accidentally. I don't know what.
Yeah. Bob's exactly. So I definitely interviewed Bob Simmons. Of course he did that lovely book. Interviewed lots and lots of people. Derek Meddings, that was a really cool one.
Yeah.
Because he was working on. What was he working on? I watched him. Oh, he was working on a Superman movie when I interviewed him. So I got to watch him. I forget if it was, I want to say it was Superman 2. It was when the bad guys like shoot their beams at this cliff. And was it Mount Rushmore? Did they actually destroy Mount Rushmore in a Superman movie?
I think they destroyed one of the faces, I think. So, yeah.
If that's what the case.
The third one, maybe, yeah.
Maybe it was Superman 3.
I think so. Yeah.
All right. Well, if that happened, that's what I saw him working on.
Okay.
So he had these little miniatures of the characters, like on a wire. He had the giant, an oversized miniature of the rock face, with an explosion inside, with all of the, the Fuller's Earth, packed in there to make a big dusty explosion. It was very cool.
Oh, wow.
It was very cool. So he was literally working on that, on a stage at Pinewood.
That's cool.
And I interviewed him, about all the work he had done on Bond, up till that point.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in those magazines, and somebody really ought to collect it all.
I think you should do one last one. I
was just going to say, you could still do
if you were to do one last one. People would buy it. They would, even though all this time has passed. I think there'd be a big audience there for that. So
yeah, and
that's my opinion.
And I got to find that those last. Unfortunately, I had a flood in the storage room, and a lot of stuff, like a lot of my old black and white stills got ruined. Some of my posters got ruined, and even a file that had a bunch of those remaining unpublished articles got ruined. So that was because literally I just had them on paper. Somebody had mailed me an article that they had written. So, but yes, I would love to. And I don't know, now that I don't want to say I'm like getting close to retirement, because I certainly have no intention of retiring.
Yeah.
But it is very hard to get a movie off the ground. So maybe I should make the time to finally do that.
Yeah. I think it would be
it'd be amazing.
A good conclusion to Bondage. So so all this time. I thank you, Steve. Do you have anything you want to add? Anything? Or
no? This is fantastic. This is an amazing talk.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, you definitely have so much info, and we really appreciate it, though. So thank you.
Thank you for everything you've done.
Yeah,
otherwise we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, we wouldn't be doing this podcast right now. So
it was really fun. It was really fun. I mean, basically, if anybody else had done it, I wouldn't have. You know, if there had been books about the making of the movies, or books about, like all these friends that I made over the years, like Steve Rubin and like Raymond Benson, people, like John Cork, people who wrote books, made documentaries. If all that stuff had existed when I was 16, I wouldn't have had to do it.
Yeah.
But none of that stuff was around.
That's crazy to me. That's crazy to me that up to that point, no one had thought about it, though.
Yeah.
There wasn't much out there. So
I started, and then, and honestly, and that was, and as much fun as it was to do it, the fact is that by the time I stopped, there were books. Steve's book had come out, and Raymond's book had come out, and other people, were doing stuff, and they were starting to do, like for Tim's movies, there were, these standalone making of behind the scenes.
Oh
books, with all the interviews and all the photos that you could ever want. Now, maybe the interviews weren't quite as in depth as what an informed fan would have done, or maybe quite as incisive or referencing Bond's history or whatnot. But the story got told. So there also kind of really wasn't a need for it anymore. And then the work that John Cork and people did for those reissue DVDs.
Yeah, those are great.
Spectacular, just spectacular.
Yeah, no, all those are really well done.
Yeah,
you can watch those now, and they're still
gripping
and fascinating. Yeah, they're really great.
I still put them on if I'm in the mood for Bond, but not a movie or something. I'll put those on while I'm working, and it's just like having
inspiration,
a friend talking about Bond with me.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. It's great that a generation of fans was able to then move into being professionals.
Yeah.
Whether they were people who went on to write. I mean, Mike France, was a subscriber to the to Bondage.
Oh, really? Wow, that's cool.
And then he went on to write Bond movies, and Shane Black, a fan who went on to become a successful writer director. It's that's just kind of how it works, right? I mean, some of these amazing 70s directors that were young men, didn't they grow up watching the movies of the 30s and 40s, and then they got to make their. So it's kind of same thing. All this whole generation or two of young people who grew up loving these Bond movies and then started making their own movies. I mean, obviously there'd be no Jason Bourne without James Bond.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's crazy to me that Fleming in Jamaica was just typing out these books, and it just spawned people's lives, their enjoyment, their livelihood. He had no idea what he was doing at that it would just generations and generations of people would grow because of that. So
No, and his effort to take the most boring name possible to
yeah, right. Yeah, I know.
And I love how it's generational too, because when I was a kid getting into this, my dad would tell me, hey, when I was your age, I had Odd Job action figure, and you pull his arm back and you throw the hat, and and when we were kids and Roger Moore was James Bond, they were souvenir comic books and magazines you could buy. They weren't real. I don't remember toys so much, but there was still stuff, and you just kind of soak it all in and outside of the movie. And then when GoldenEye came out, my brother was in elementary school, and that was his first Bond in a theater, and he started buying the souvenir magazines, and of course he had a Nintendo 64. once he got the video game GoldenEye, that was it. And
Yeah.
Oh, I did some writing on the James Bond road race game.
Oh, you did?
really,
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
they how did that happen? They weren't happy with the dialogue. They weren't happy with the exchanges between like Bond and Q or something like that.
Okay.
So they wanted somebody who could write, but
Wow.
also somebody who knew Bond. So I
That's
wrote
cool.
just a whole bunch of sort of pithy exchanges
oh
between,
wow,
Bond
Wow, that's
and
great.
I think it was mostly Bond and Q.
That's awesome.
that's
That,
great.
that was a funny little gig to have.
Oh,
What a great
man.
gig to have. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you've actually written for James Bond then. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so-
not like my friend Raymond.
Oh yeah, Raymond's great. He's very nice. We just spoke with him for the
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah, he was wonderful. So
It's funny. I know Raymond a very, very, very long time, and boy, just on a personal level, I've always been so inspired by his story. Here's a guy who came to New York to be a playwright,
yeah.
and maybe a composer.
Hmm.
Neither of those exactly worked out, so he swerved and started doing some writing. Then he got the idea to do that Bond book, and then I mean the idea that you've got this crazy pie in the sky wish as a kid, like, oh, maybe I could write a James Bond book one day. And then
And then he
it
did
happens. And one day the phone call comes, and it's like, we would like you to write the new James. I mean, it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And then to be kind of, summarily dismissed from it and then be asked back
Come
again.
back. I know.
Just fantastic. I love his biography.
Yeah. I think the appreciation for his books has just grown and grown as time has gone on. So that's why they asked him back as well. So I think, I mean, he's great. He definitely understands Bond, that's for sure. So
Well, unlike some of these people, his version of the assignment was to try to write new Ian Fleming books. He wasn't trying to make it his own.
Yeah.
The way maybe some other people did. He was thinking, okay, well,
Yeah.
what's the assignment?
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely
He nailed it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again. We appreciate it. I did. I'm gonna clap there. So
Thank you, Richard.
thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So much fun.
Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. I did. Do you talk about Bond often, or just when we ask, or when people ask you to? Sorry, no.
Yeah, I guess it's mostly when you ask.
Yeah. Okay.
Or when somebody, like wants to know, tell me 3 interesting facts about you that, we wouldn't know otherwise. Because if people Google me, they see Man from Earth or Diva's Christmas Carol or Abraham Lincoln versus Zombies, or whatever the hell they see, or they see MTV.
Yeah.
So they say, well, what's something about you that, that I don't know? And I'm like, well, I started the first James Bond fan club and published a magazine called Bondage. That's one of my other go-to trivia thing is that I'm the guy that introduced George Michael and Elton John.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Wow.
Oh, that's cool.
I guess that's a story for another day.
Okay, great.
I want to hear that story.
Yeah, I know. Well, thank you again. We appreciate your time. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me, boys.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks.
Take care.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Take care.